February. Joining us now, Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. She testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee today for a hearing on continued assaults on reproductive freedom. Senator, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing your story. I look forward to the day when women don't have to relive and publicly share their pains, that we can be treated as people, as someone, though, who has gone through IVF. Your first thoughts when the Alabama ruling came down?
My first thought was it finally happened, because back in 2014, my fertility doctor said to me, Tammy, if these personhood laws start to pass, what we're doing today could be illegal, and what we're doing could actually mean that I could be convicted of manslaughter, because we were at the time deciding to discard 3 fertilized eggs that were non-viable. If he had implanted those 3 fertilized eggs that were non-viable in me, they would have caused a miscarriage. And so we discarded those 3, and he said this could be an act of murder or manslaughter if personhood laws pass. And here we are 10 years later, and now we have a Supreme Court decision in Alabama that basically bestows personhood on a fertilized egg. So his warning came true, and it was just 10 years later that it happened.
How prescient, and there are, cascading consequences, Senator, as you well know. Tell me where your bill stands, and given what we're seeing in the House, where you have Republican Congressman from New York, Mark Molinaro, who, of course, is in a district that President Biden carried during the last election, signing on as a co-sponsor of the House legislation. Do you see any such opportunities in the Senate?
It's been crickets. I mean, the Republicans, nobody has come and said, Tammy, I want to sign on to your bill. That has not yet happened. And I've introduced this bill multiple times over the last several Congresses, and even in this latest one, where we have so many Republicans stepping up and saying, oh, I support IVF, I support IVF. They still have not come forward to co-sponsor the legislation. And it's really simple legislation. All my legislation says is that you have a statutory right to seek assistive reproductive technology. You have, as a doctor, the right to offer it if you want to. And you have, as an insurance company, the right to cover it if you want to. But it doesn't force anybody to seek it, doesn't force anybody to cover it, doesn't force anybody to offer it. It just says if you want to start a family and you need to get a little help, and you're doing it all within the medical standards of practice, then you should have the right to do that. And not a single one of these IVF-loving politicians on the Republican side have decided to come forward to co-sponsor.
Let's talk about one of those IVF-loving politicians. Take a listen to what House Speaker Mike Johnson said.
I know you said you support IVF, but there's this question of embryos. In the process, they are destroyed, disposed of. If you believe life begins at conception, fertilization, and I know you do you see that as murder?
It's something that we've got to grapple with.
Senator, my colleague Molly Jeong-Fass has a question about that.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for joining us. And, I feel like I should say that I had my twins through IVF, and, and I'm glad that we can talk about it, right? But yes. I'm curious, when we talk about these embryonic personhood bills, is the Republicans' inability to legislate here political, or do you think it really is their not understanding how, like in Alabama, we had they indemnified IVF clinics. And so if they killed an embryonic person, right, they would not face prosecution. I mean, is this that they've just written themselves into a corner with the legislation, or are they really worried about political pushback for IVF?
All they care about is political pushback, because they could solve this by saying that a fertilized egg is not a human being. And remember, on day 1, it's not even an embryo. It's just a fertilized egg. And they're saying that once the egg is fertilized, it is a person with equal rights to the woman who would carry it. That Alabama bill did exactly that. It indemnified IVF clinics. It didn't say that it's not still killing a person. It's just saying we just won't prosecute you. And so it opens the door for in the future for prosecution could actually happen in the future if they wanted to do it. And by the way, this isn't just about access to reproductive technology. This is also about contraception. Remember that an IUD prevents implantation of fertilized egg. In Illinois, we're already getting women traveling to Illinois from as far away as Texas to have an IUD implanted because their doctors back in Texas are afraid that they could be prosecuted for implanting an IUD, which is a device that prevents fertilized eggs from being implanted. So they have opened a hornet's nest and they don't know how to deal with it. And they're talking out of both sides of their mouths. And they say they support IVF, and yet over 100 Republicans in the House have signed on to their personhood bill.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, the idea that you have women from Texas traveling to Illinois, because so often we talk about this as red states and blue states, when in reality there are consequences for all states. You have political reporting that your governor, J.B. Pritzker, governors in other Democratic states moving to make their states IVF sanctuaries in the wake of the Alabama decision. What does that mean for women in red states? What does that mean for women in blue states who also need care from that facilities? It seems like a big mess.
It is a big mess, and it is very dangerous for women in these red states with these personhood laws, because what you're finding is a lot of doctors and OBGYNs are leaving their practices. They're closing their practices in these states and moving to states like Illinois. Now, that's good for Illinois, and we welcome them with open arms. But that, I worry about my sisters in all of those red states, you know, all the moms and moms-to-be who need health care, and they're not going to have the OBGYNs in their states to take care of them. And that's, you know, already America is the only developed nation that has an increasing maternal mortality rate, especially among mothers of color, and that's only going to make it worse.
I was about to say that chasm is going to continue to widen. Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Molly is sticking with us. We're going to sneak in a quick break.